Fellas, who is the best fighter who's only 1 or 2 wins from making it into the rankings of their weight class? Maybe some of them have faced ranked opponents before or are going to face ranked opponents in the future. And this isn't just a prospect list because some of them I wouldn't class as prospects. Maybe some of them have been ranked before and have maybe slid out the rankings, whereas some of them might actually be prospects. So we're going to be going through every weight class, picking out the one fighter who I think is the best in that weight class who just hasn't been able to make it into the rankings as of yet. So let me know if you agree. Let me know if you'd have changed any fighters around. But we'll go in there with the heavyweight division now. When you get outside the rankings in the heavyweight division, it's a very dark and gloomy place with very little talent, let's just say that. But the one fighter I've chosen is Waldo Cortes Acosta. You might hate him, you might love him, but I've just got to include Waldo Cortes Acosta. I'm 99% sure he's going to be getting a ranked opponent in his next fight. He was able to shut down the big prospect in Rob Ellis Despain. A lot of people was very high in Rob Ellis Despain, and even though it was a very uneventful fight, he was able to shut down the prospect of Rob Ellis Despain, and obviously he had that cringeworthy fight with Andrei Arlovski, but you've got to give him respect. He was able to beat Arlovski. And the only guy he's lost to in the UFC is obviously Rogerio de Lima, who is actually a ranked opponent himself. I really do feel like Waldo Cortes Acosta, he's going to get a ranked opponent in his next fight. Maybe not the most interesting fighter, maybe not the most dangerous fighter, but he has got a bit of a resume put together. And like I said, the fact that he was able to shut down Rob Ellis Despain a few weeks ago, who was one of the biggest prospects in the UFC, I think we've got to give Waldo Cortes Acosta the respect, because genuinely, who else is there outside of the heavyweight rankings? Mohammed Usman, Mick Parkin. I mean, these are the guys that we're working with here. So I'm going to give Waldo Cortes Acosta his respect. He gets it done. He's fairly well-rounded as well. He can finish a fight. Well, not finish a fight, but he can, you know, he can keep the fight anywhere. So I'll put Waldo Cortes Acosta, the best unranked fighter in the heavyweight division, and he's probably going to get matched up against like a Rodrigo Nascimento to win his next fight, or an actual ranked opponent. So I'm going to have to put Cortes Acosta as the best unranked heavyweight. But yeah, we're not starting off strong because, like I said, the heavyweight division, when you get outside the heavyweight rankings, it is a dark and gloomy place with not much talent to behold. So for heavyweight, I'll put Waldo Cortes Acosta. He's fairly well-rounded. He's got 1 or 2 decent wins, and I think he'll be, I know he's lost to a ranked opponent before, but I think he'll probably be getting a ranked opponent in his next fight. And then the light heavyweight division, a fighter that obviously would have been ranked if they would have won their last fight, and it is Vitor Petrino. Vitor Petrino, he was 11-1. Obviously, he was undefeated previous to his fight with Anthony Smith that he had at UFC 301. So obviously, he lost to Anthony Smith at UFC 301. Some people called it a fraud check, but I don't think this is, you know, showing that Vitor Petrino isn't talented enough to get into the light heavyweight rankings. I'm almost 99% sure he will make it into the rankings. I think the fight with Anthony Smith was just him being unexperienced. He left his neck wide open for the guillotine. Anthony Smith obviously being a way more experienced fighter than Vitor Petrino was able to latch up the guillotine. But as far as skill goes, it has to be Vitor Petrino. He's a big guy. He's a really, really good grappler. He can also strike. He's got a lot of pop in his hands. He's dangerous, and he's already beaten a lot of fairly fairly solid fighters in outside of the rankings at the light heavyweight division. Obviously, he had a really good win over Tyson Pedro, which was Pedro's retirement fight as well. And Vitor Petrino, he's dangerous. He's well-rounded. He can win a fight from anywhere, and I honestly believe he will be ranked in the next 12 months. I know he fought Anthony Smith, and he was the favorite going into that fight, but like I said, it just showed the experience difference between Petrino and Anthony Smith, in my opinion. So for the light heavyweight division, I think Vitor Petrino is the best unranked light heavyweight. And on the topic of light heavyweight division, who else is there outside of Vitor Petrino? Like, I'm not being funny, but when you get outside of the rankings of the light heavyweight division, similar to heavyweight, there is no prospects. There is genuinely no prospects in the light heavyweight division outside of the rankings. It's got to be Vitor Petrino. He's going to be ranked one day. A lot of potential to his name. So for light heavyweight, I'm picking Vitor Petrino. And then the middleweight division is the guy who's going to be main eventing this week, Ikram Aliskerov. Now, some may argue that he's not been in the UFC long enough to make the list, that he's not as proven as some of the other guys in the middleweight division, but Ikram Aliskerov is my favorite prospect in the UFC. And I know this isn't a prospect list, this is the best unranked fighter, but Ikram Aliskerov, what he's shown, he is super, super dangerous and super well-rounded. He was able to KO Chinny Phil Hose. He was able to finish Wally Alves in that first round. He's impressed me so far in the UFC, and he's been able to terminate every single fighter that he's faced in his MMA career. And the only guy that he hasn't been able to beat is Mr. Hamzat Chimaev himself, who is already one of the biggest names in the UFC right now. Ikram Aliskerov, do I think he beats Robert Whittaker? Not necessarily. Obviously, I'll have a prediction video on that fight coming out tomorrow, but I don't necessarily think he beats Robert Whittaker, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be a competitive fight. I think Ikram Aliskerov's got a ton of hype to his name. I don't just think he's another one of these Dagestanis that are Dagestani, and for that reason they've managed to become a prospect. I think Ikram Aliskerov is super talented. He's dangerous. His striking offense, his grappling, his submission game as well. Everything about Ikram Aliskerov proves that he is going to climb the rankings one day. And I think Ikram Aliskerov is the best fighter in the unranked area of the middleweight division. And let's be honest, that is why they chose him to fight Robert Whittaker. That is why out of everyone in the middleweight division, they chose Ikram Aliskerov to fight Whittaker rather than any of the other ranked opponents in the division. So I'm picking Ikram Aliskerov for middleweight. Welterweight, I've chosen Rude Boy Randy Brown. Randy Brown, he's only really lost to the top guys in the welterweight division. Like, if you really think about it, he's lost to Bilal Muhammad. He lost to Vicente Luque in 2020, and that was when Vicente Luque was at his best. He lost to Jack Della Maddalena last year. Like, he's only really lost to the top competition of the welterweight division, and he's put together a lot of good wins. Muslim Salikov, obviously in his last fight at UFC 302 when he just beat Zaleski dos Santos. He's got a lot of good wins as well. Francisco Trinaldo, Chaos Williams, who's doing really good now as well. Alex Oliveira, Jared Gooden, Randy Brown. Honestly, I'd say he deserves a ranked opponent in his next fight. I know he's lost to a couple ranked opponents already, but he's put together a lot of good wins, and he's well-rounded as well, and he's such a good striker. He is fairly well-rounded, but I'd say he's more of a striker. He's such a good striker, really light on his feet, able to land shots from anywhere, so big for the division as well as Randy Brown. I don't know how this dude makes the welterweight division, but Randy Brown, he's also managed to beat Wally Alves, just like Ikram Aliskerov has. Brian Barberena back in 2019. Mickey Gall. Yeah, Randy Brown for me is the best unranked welterweight, and it's pretty competitive as the unranked area of the welterweight division. There's a lot of prospects in the welterweight division, and I think Randy Brown is the best just to not make the rankings, and I hope he does get a ranked opponent in his next fight. I'm not saying he needs to fight anyone crazy. I just want to see Randy Brown tested against another ranked opponent, so I'm going to say Randy Brown for the welterweight division is the best unranked welterweight right now, and I think the win over Zaleski dos Santos put the nail on the stamp for that. And then we've got the lightweight division. This was by far, in my opinion, the toughest one to pick because there's a lot of fighters. There's Thiago Moises, there's Yoel Alvarez, you know, there's Mitabek Orobai. There's just a ton of fighters you could choose for the lightweight division, but I have decided to pick Diego Ferreira. Now, Diego, he has lost to a couple of the guys in the lightweight division. Obviously, he lost to Gregor Gillipsy, who's nowhere to be seen. He's lost to Gamrot, who's a top lightweight. He lost to Benil Dariush back in 2021, but he's also got some really good wins. Michael Johnson, the most inconsistent fighter in the UFC. Rebeski in his last fight at UFC St. Louis, where he was able to beat Rebeski pretty comfortably as well. That was a dominant performance from Ferreira. Anthony Pettis as well. Kyle Nelson, Jared Gordon. He's beaten a lot of top guys as Diego Ferreira, and it seems like he's just becoming increasingly dangerous. Before, back in like 2020, 2019, we saw him as this really good grappler who had really good jiu-jitsu that he could latch up, whereas now he's showing that he's much more dangerous on the feet, and he looks like an absolute killer these days. He is absolutely terminating people like he did to Rebetski when he fought him at UFC St. Louis. So for the lightweight division, in what is a super competitive division, I'm picking Diego Ferreira out of all of these guys. He's dangerous, his striking is improving, and he will terminate everyone. Like, he's just an absolute killer, and I'm picking him for the lightweight division because of that. And he's got some good wins on his name as well. Like I said, Rebetski, Michael Johnson, Jared Gordon, Anthony Pettis, he's got Kyle Nelson. He's got a lot of good wins that he's put together. So for the lightweight division, I'm picking Diego Ferreira. Maybe he can get matched up against like a Yoel Alvarez in his next fight, and if he wins that, he can get ranked, but I'm picking Diego Ferreira for this one. The featherweight division, I'm picking Joanderson Brito. I actually think he should have been ranked after his last performance at UFC 301. Joanderson Brito is really good, and I don't just think this guy has potential to be ranked, but I think he has a lot of potential to even climb the rankings of the featherweight division. He's really good. He's the only other guy in the UFC to defeat Diego Lopez outside of Movsar Evloev, which is obviously a big statement looking at the way that Diego Lopez's career is going nowadays. So he was able to beat Diego Lopez on the Contender Series. Andre Philly as well. He was able to submit and finish Jonathan Pierce. In his last fight, he absolutely destroyed and demolished the legs of Jack Shaw, which was a really good win because Jack Shaw, he's also one of the top unranked featherweights in the world. So Jack Shaw, in my opinion, Joanderson Brito, in my opinion, is definitely the best unranked featherweight right now. He's a killer as well. He's finished every single one of his last 5 fights in the UFC. He's a submission artist. He's got really good submissions. He can find them from anywhere. And when it comes to his fight on the feet, his Muay Thai, he's so effective. His kicks, his boxing, he's so dangerous. He's powerful. He's such a good prospect in the featherweight division. And in my opinion, he's the best unranked featherweight right now, and I would argue that he should be ranked already, and I hope he does get a ranked opponent in his next fight because he honestly deserves it with the way that he's been looking recently. So yeah, I'm going Anderson Brito for the featherweight division. And then for the bantamweight division, I've picked two fighters for this one. Two different fighters. They're both at different stages in their career, but the first one I've gone for is Davy Grant. I'm going Davy Grant. Davy Grant he's a really good submission artist, but he's also just a scrapper as Davy Grant. He's got a lot of good wins as well. Martin Day, but most importantly, the win over Jonathan Martinez. He was able to defeat Jonathan Martinez back in 2021. He's got a win over Marlon Vera as well. He's also lost to Marlon Vera. He's 1-1 against Vera. And even though he might be falling short recently, he lost to Adrian Yanez. I would argue that he should be on a 3-fight winning streak. He lost his last fight to Daniel Marcos, but that was one of the biggest robberies ever. He should have defeated Daniel Marcos. I had him winning that fight. He should be on a winning streak right now, and I honestly thought he did beat Daniel Marcos. Before that, he was coming off 2 finishes as well on a 2-fight winning streak, with 2 of them coming by way of finish. Davy Grant is a really dangerous fighter, and I just think he should be, well, I don't think he should be ranked, but I think he's one of the best fighters in the unranked area of the bantamweight division. He's got a lot of solid wins to his name. He's dangerous. I think he should have won his last fight, and I would argue that we should be seeing Davy Grant be facing a ranked bantamweight right now. So I'm going Davy Grant for the bantamweight division, and I've also gone for Said Nurmagomedov. Really good submission artist is Said Nurmagomedov. He hasn't really beaten any top level opposition as of right now. A lot of the guys that he's beaten aren't the highest level competition. In fact, his last fight was a guy that's never won in the UFC before. But there's nothing, we can't deny the talent that Said Nurmagomedov has. He's a really good submission artist. His signature Darce choke is super dangerous. He's all right on the feet. He did lose to Jonathan Martinez in 2023. He got pieced up by Jonathan Martinez, which I understand why he's not ranked, but he's got a lot of good wins together, and I do think he has potential to be ranked if he maybe improves his striking a little bit, and he's able to beat one of these topper guys in the unranked space of the bantamweight division, maybe like a Chris Gutierrez or something like that. But for the bantamweight division, I'm going Davy Grant and Said Nurmagomedov for this one. And then the flyweight division, I've gone for 2 fighters. The first fighter being a guy who can never get a fight because it keeps getting cancelled, Joshua Van. Now, he has only had 3 fights in the UFC, but first of all, it's the flyweight division. He hasn't got the biggest talent pool in the UFC, but Joshua Van's really good, man. His boxing is so crisp. This guy's kickboxing and his boxing is so crisp. He's able to land shots he's just able to land shots from everywhere. He's so good on the feet. His clinch work is amazing. And I think Joshua Van, I would have loved to see him face Tagiro Benkov. Obviously, that got cancelled. He even got scheduled against Tatsuro Taira, which got cancelled. And I think he should deserve a ranked opponent in his next fight because of the talent that he's proven so far in the UFC. He's looked pretty much untouchable in his UFC career so far. So I'm going Joshua Van. He's been matched up against ranked opponents that he's never been able to get. And I really do hope he gets a proper ranked opponent soon because he honestly deserves it. And then the other fighter I've gone for is Bruno Silva. I've gone for Bruno Silva because, again, similar to Joshua Fan, he's got a lot of good wins already. He's matched up against a ranked opponent, Cody Durden, which obviously if he's able to beat Durden, he's going to become ranked. And even though he had a bit of a shaky start to his UFC career, losing to David Dvorak and Tagir Ulanbekov, who are already ranked opponents, he has managed to, he's on a 3-fight winning streak now, all by way of finish. He was able to get a win over Tyson Nam as well, and he seems like if he's improved his game a lot. Super well-rounded is Bruno Silva, and if he does beat Cody Durden, there is no denying that he will be ranked in the flyweight division. But that is my list of the best unranked fighters in every weight class in the UFC. Let me know your thoughts on this list. Do you agree? Should I have included any other fighters? But I think this is the best list in terms of what they've shown recently and who they've beaten and who they've lost to. So let me know your thoughts on the list, and thank you for watching.